contracts. This is really Debbie's thing. And moving forward, everyone's different.
Careful what you
I think Ashley's coming, or Amanda was coming, maybe Jane. I understand. They're a little late for me. As usual, we'll start late. Don't all come in at once now, guys. So where's your listing? Is it McEwen?
This one's okay.
Okay. Did you grow up in McEwen?
I did, yeah.
You went to McEwen High?
I was the same.
Okay. When did you graduate?
26.
Oh my God. I'm so old. I know, Frank. But, you know,
It's all relative.
I know.
So,
Yeah, we're fun. I'm waiting for a couple more people. I'll be right back. I just want to check with Ashley. Okay. I was gonna wait for Jane. And I don't know for sure if she's coming, so I'm just gonna get started.
When I graduated high school, you could still buy lead paint.
You could? Oh my God. No. Yeah,
You could still buy lead paint.
I know. That's like old. My house is full. No, it's not. I'm not saying that out loud, but it was built in 1930, period. So, okay. When we have a better turnout for this class, I usually like to break the room into twos, but it's fine. We don't need to. Basically, we're starting with negotiations. This would normally be over a 2-day period, but honestly, the last time I did it, I don't think it was enough material to kind of take up 2 whole days. So we're gonna do 3 days of this. So we're gonna do,
One tomorrow.
yes, lending. I'm trying to get a lender to come, but they must all be straight out. Donna Weinberg is a lender that I really love to use. I talk about her all the time. She actually used to be the resident lender in this office. But now she works for Bay Equity, and I would love for her to come, but she might not be available. Matt McDonald, I've taught with before. I'd like him to come. I think he might be on vacation. He just got engaged. Usually in this time in real estate, people start going on vacation because it's slower. So it's like fall time is time for realtors to have fun. But I'm going to start with negotiations. Brian had some really good questions earlier about contracts. I know that you guys, you have the unique experience of working with your mom, just like I had the unique experience of working with my dad. I had access to a bunch of contracts. Brian doesn't, Frank doesn't. So I would like to kind of just go over briefly what they are. If you have questions after this, book a one-on-one with Debbie Longo. She's going to be able to explain it significantly better than I can because I just do it. I'm like a robot. I'm like, this is what it is. This is the offer. She'll be able to explain a lot more context behind it in a much better way. And she's super big on compliance. So, but we're going to start with negotiations because Matt's got to get out of here early and he doesn't need help with contracts. So we're going to start with negotiations. He probably doesn't need help with that either because his mom's a G, but we're going to just do it anyway. So my favorite part of real estate is negotiations. It's kind of like it's like the fiery part. It's really where your value shines as a realtor. Sometimes people don't know the value of a realtor until they're in a situation where they want to say no and they don't know how, or they're unsure of a situation that you're exposed to on a regular basis. You're there to remove the emotional aspect of this process to get the deal done. If 2 people are heavily emotionally involved in the process, because as much as people don't want to say real estate is an emotional process, it absolutely is, or maybe they're just not aware of it, it would be hard to like get the deal to come together if it's just them together. It's like more of a competition. When you're working with your co-broke, the person representing the other side of the deal, they should be like your friend. They should be like your buddy. They should be someone who you're working towards getting to the closing line, to the finish line, which is the closing. Obviously, you look out for your client 100% through the whole way, but you can't let the irritation on either side intervene with your relationship with the co-broke. So these are just situations that I've experienced where it could have very easily gone left. And like we could, if there was no realtors involved, these people would have killed each other. So these are my unique experiences. I call them bad deals. Not every deal stays together. So I would like to show you some negotiations that stay together, some negotiations that don't, some that have almost fallen apart and how I fix them. So I usually do an icebreaker because there's only 3 of us. We all know each other. We don't need to be doing that. So this is where we would normally do a group of buyers, group of sellers. I'd like to modify this in time. So if you guys have feedback for me on how you'd like to do that, I want to hear it because I don't want to be just talking up here all the time at you guys. My goal is to get as many bodies in here as I can so that we can really break into groups and I can give you whiteboards and we could really just go all out at it. And it's kind of just going to prepare you for the curveballs that you'll see. I'm really just going to be talking with you guys about it today just because we don't have enough people in here. But that's totally fine. Screw the icebreaker. So this is something that would be like a small issue. This is normal. This is something that would pop up on any given home inspection. So the buyer has a home inspection and the roof is fully depreciated but still functioning. The buyer wants a concession of $12,000 for the cost of replacing the roof. Do you think that's reasonable? The buyer has a home inspection and the roof is fully depreciated, but it's still functioning. The buyer wants a concession of $12,000 for the cost of replacing the roof. Is this reasonable?
It depends on.
If your client,
My initial answer is yes, anything's reasonable if you can get it. And all I can say is no. So it's reasonable to try.
is it in a market where they have 3 other backup offers reasonable to try?
No.
Okay, so it's situational. So what you want, I don't have COVID, I tested negative, I just have a cough. So basically what you want to keep in mind is, sometimes when you're negotiating with your client. they really feel strongly about something. If this roof had, what is my, oh no. So if this roof had failed, which means there's water coming through, you see water stains on the roof, that's a failed roof. That's different. Then I can say this roof has failed. It's leaking everywhere. It can cause potential mold issues. Then we have a leg to stand on. Sure, I can ask for the 12K is a little excessive, but depending on the size of the home, we'll ask for some sort of concession to get the roof repaired for after closing. If it's fully depreciated in this situation, which it is, keep wanting to touch this because I have an iPad. Because of in this situation, it's only fully depreciated. The roof is still functioning. It's just at any point it needs to be replaced. And what you want to explain to your clients is this is something that should be discussed before you even put an offer in. You're going to know this roof is cupping and curling, doesn't look good. You know, if you attend any of the real estate, the home inspection classes that we have here, they show you pictures of crappy roofs. You know, I can show you some pictures of some from my old inspection reports that I have. But basically, these are things that you want to become aware of, notice, and discuss it at the showing. Even if you do that, there are going to be some clients that are going to come back to you and say, oh, you know, I know that, but either way, I want to ask for it. You have to do what they ask you to do, but it's your job to, for lack of a better term, make it weird. You got to be like, listen, it's a little unreasonable. It's fully depreciated. I will certainly ask, but keep in mind that they had 3 other backup offers. They could counter and just say no, but if this is a deal breaker for you, don't, I don't know how this is going to pan out. This could kill the deal. If you're okay with that, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's just the hill you want to die.
But it's also something you want to pay attention to, because if this is someone who's chronically getting to the home inspection phase and constantly pulling out, that's a nightmare. You know what I mean? You don't want to be, you want to be gentle with it. You have to find a really kind of like a finesse and a light applied pressure to let them know when they're wrong without pissing them off, for lack of a better term. And they're relying on you for your knowledge, so let them know if they're being unreasonable. So this is where you kind of have to negotiate with your clients. I've had clients say, you know, this is like that literally just as early as a week or 2 ago, I had a home inspection, heating system's fully depreciated. They said, oh, what about that? And I was like, well, it is what it is. It's functioning. You can't go to them and say, hey, your working heating system, I'd like you to replace it. It just doesn't work that way. If it's something that you think is too much to take on for you, you can certainly challenge it and just say, listen, this is too much. It looks like this is going to need to be done as sooner rather than later. But just know, this is why you want to have these conversations at the showing, because if you get to that point and they say, oh, I don't like it because it's fully depreciated, the seller can come back to you and say, well, when you saw this property, you knew it was. So why did you put an offer in on it? And they can challenge that. More so in New Hampshire than they can in Mass, because in Mass, you can do it for any reason at all. You don't need to specify. All you have to say is, I'm unsatisfied with the findings of the home inspection. In New Hampshire, it's a little gray. So just want to be careful.
Now, when you say depreciated, does that mean like with a roof, it's over 30 years old? If you have to
Yeah.
actually see signs.
The home inspector will let you know, like, hey, I think it looks like it's about this old. You'll see, like for instance, I had a property I was selling in Lawrence, and it was obvious. Like there's like usually shingles on the grass. You can see they're starting to break off. They're starting to deteriorate. They're cupping. They're curling. Sometimes it's just one section of the roof. Sometimes it's the whole thing. And that's another where it's like, you know, sometimes it can look really bad from the outside, and then it's not failed for whatever reason. It's not letting any water in.
I had a roof replaced a few years ago, and it was over 30 years. I did that.
Yeah.
And I said I should get the roof replaced. If you looked at the roof,
Wouldn't know.
it looked like it was really intact. There was a little piece here, a little piece there. And then when I had the guys come and do the roof, said, was it time? And he goes, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And what he showed me was that the shingles were brittle.
Yeah, and that's when that makes them
And you
able to
can't tell
break
by
off.
looking.
No.
You know, the fish lips is something else.
Yeah. But you can see it if you see them starting to break off, like if you're showing the home and you see around the property that there's like roof stuff like that, that's what you want to pay attention to. But our next subject would be so your buyer client has a VA loan and the VA water test comes back with high levels of an unacceptable bacteria. What do you request from the seller and why? I'm going to make it weird and make you guys answer. Any idea? None at all.
Go back and read that.
Your buyer client has a VA loan and the VA water test comes back with high levels of unacceptable bacteria.
Well,
It's a well. If there is not a well, there's no water test because it's public.
So, put a filter system in, was there a filter system in there now?
No.
I want a filter system.
Are you sure? Is that your final answer?
Yeah, because there's no consequence if I'm not so sure.
Exactly. That could be a resolution. However, the more standard response would be, I would like the well shocked. The well needs to be bleached and it needs to be retested prior to closing. We have a VA loan with a well. If there's coliform in it, they shock the well, we retest, and the loan can't go through until the VA is okay with the levels of. Yeah, they have to. In the seller's position, if they give you a hard time about that, you can say, you know what kind of loan I had before I got here. Ways that we are running into this and where it's kind of been, it's unfortunate because obviously veterans deserve a VA loan, but they don't always get accepted because there's no money down and there's just a lot of risk to the seller. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. What a VA loan holder or person who's trying to get a VA loan might do would say, if there's any issue, I will shock the well and I will have it retested at my own cost. And then I'll deal with any ramifications of my loan, my appraisal, or any situation like that that's going to affect me getting my financing. I'm going to take care of. I have a house under contract in Hudson. It's a VA loan. That's exactly what they did. Anything that's an issue because of the appraisal, like for instance, there's a pool that's up and it's green. They don't take care of it. That could be an issue for me with the VA loan. So the appraiser might say, we need this pool off the property. Then because we have established from the beginning of the transaction that the buyer is going to take care of that, I'm going to reach out to the buyer and say, hey, the appraisal came back and said that they want this pool gone, so you have to figure out a way to get it off my seller's property if you want the loan. No, it's a above ground pool, so I'm not overly concerned about it. But
when you shock the well, okay, it makes the loan, but that's only temporary.
it's not. That's the treatment. Sometimes wells can develop bacteria just because they're laying stagnant. So if there's only one person living there and it's a well that's big enough for like a family of 5 and they don't use their water that frequently, the water stays stagnant longer than normal. So that allows bacteria to build. A lot of times this happens in new construction homes because the well is set up and no one lives there. And so the water's just sitting there. And so when they test, there's high levels of coliform, high levels of arsenic, and then it also depends on the bacteria. If it's arsenic, they may say you need to bleach the well and you need to put a filtration system in. I think I have this. Okay, no. So for instance, what may happen from here. So the levels come back unacceptable. Seller agrees. I'm going to bleach the tank, bleach the well, and you can retest. We retest again, and there's still a problem. There's still high levels. What do we do now? Seller's getting irritated. Not happy about it. Doesn't want to pay for another test. Didn't work. This has actually happened to me. Didn't work. No new well. Can't do a new well. Can't dig a new well. It's a lot of money. So there's a UV system that gets in play. At this point, this is where you have to feel it out. If the seller is like, okay, it's fine. In a buyer's market, they might be willing to work with you and be like, listen, I'll put the UV light treatment in, whatever it needs to happen. I'm going to get it done so that this loan can close. In this market, I'm like, buddy, you better figure this out or I'm getting someone else to buy this house. Realistically, if they've accepted a VA loan, they probably don't have many other offers in hand because a VA loan shouldn't be looked at the way it is, but it's just a higher risk loan. So that would be something that, like, sometimes these negotiations don't always just end with that one thing. Sometimes if it can evolve into something more. In this specific situation that I was in with this, it had to be retested 3 times. It needs to be treated 3 times. We shocked it 3 times and then finally added a UV system and a filtration system at the faucet. That was the resolution. We were able to get the seller to deal with that because it was more of a buyer-friendly market at the time. So that is kind of some things that you would need to start to negotiate and familiarize yourself with. Okay. Your FHA buyer client is looking at a home that they really love, but there's chip paint on the exterior and missing railings on the exterior stairs. He wants to put an offer in. What do you add to make his offer more competitive? I already leaked it. You'll take care of it. Frank's right. Ding, ding, ding. Frank gets points. So yes, Frank's right.
My brother was.
So if you have an FHA buyer and you're trying to get them to compete in this market, and there's a bunch of stuff that you know is wrong with the home, you want to categorize it. If you're walking in here and you're like, okay, well, there's like no ceiling in the, like in certain parts, like usually sometimes if they're an FHA buyer, they're kind of buying like by the skin of their teeth. Not every FHA buyer, certainly not the case, but you want to kind of take into consideration, what can my client even do? Like, how much cash do they have on hand? Are they putting all their money down for the deposit? Do they have the money to do this? These are all things you want to talk with them about before you submit the offer. Because if you wait and just submit the offer, and then this comes up at the time of appraisal, then you have to tell your client, hey, you should deal with this, because if not, they're going to put the house back on the market, and or they're just not going to agree. Your loan's going to fall apart. Something bad's going to happen. Do you really want to be doing that in the middle of your transaction, where you're going to have to ask for an extension on financing because the appraisal is an issue, and then you're going to have to ask for an extension on closing because the financing is not done? It creates a ripple effect. So this is where the setting the expectation early is very important. So you want to be paying attention, and your knowledge on the lending, which is why I want to have a lender come tomorrow. You need to know a little bit about everything. And that's why we get paid the way we do. We're their psychologists. We know a little about lending. We know a little about law. We know a little about negotiations. We know a little about everything. And we're like the people that tie the whole package up with a pretty bow and shove it down the line. So this is something that, did I let her in? Okay.
This is a side note, my brother refinanced the VA loan in January.
Yeah.
There was peeling paint.
Don't make you paint it.
They made him paint it.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, it's January. I'm gonna have to paint this again in the summer. He said,
Doesn't
I'm
matter.
gonna paint it now.
Yeah, they don't want any sort
They
of,
slapped the coat of paint on it.
because it's a HUD loan, the risk, they just make you jump through more hoops. They want minimal risk. So they want things that make sense to safety is usually what becomes a problem. Chip paint, especially on an older home, is obviously an issue, especially in New England. Like we have, like, I don't know if you guys sat through Andy Consoli's class today, but I think that New Hampshire, New England has like the highest deaths due to lead paint poisoning in the country, because we're living in the oldest part of the country. So to make your buyer's offer more competitive, with the initial offer, you should add to an addendum or additional provisions that my client's willing to take care of anything regarding their FHA appraisal that could be a hindrance to them obtaining financing. You want to make sure that you're clear to your client that what they're taking on, like what you see that you think could be a problem, and that there is potential that there could be more problems that arise. So this is something that you want to take into consideration. And this is where it's important to not waive your home inspection, because if you say, hey, we'll take care of all of it and we're waiving our home inspection, and then the appraiser comes and turns the heat on and the heat doesn't work, you just sign your client up to have to pay for a new heating system in the home they're buying, and they have to do it ahead of time because they won't get their financing otherwise. So you have to be smart. You have to know a little about everything. And this is why you're in the coaching program, because you're in this process. I would hope that someone would come to me and be like, hey, I don't know what to do. So I've had moments like that as well that we'll be talking about. So to make their offer more competitive, just like the VA loan, you agree to take care of some stuff. In a normal buyer's market's neutralizing a little bit, certainly not to the level where you should be just submitting FHA offers without these kind of discussions, but it's getting more fair, and hopefully it stays that way. If it doesn't, this is just a strategy to make your FHA buyers more competitive, because there is a big pool of FHA buyers, and honestly, the market we're in is unfair. Home ownership should be attainable. If you can afford a $350,000 loan, you should be able to buy a house, regardless of what your loan looks like. So I work extra hard for these people because they're having to hurdle a lot more than other buyers that are out there. So just keep that in mind. And also, when you have FHA buyers, this is not really regarding negotiation, but you want to let them know what they're up against. Don't let them be naive to the fact that like they have an FHA loan. Don't make them feel bad about it. It's not a ton of, I think it's like at one point it was like 80% of all loans were FHA. Sometimes it's because they had to dig in their credit for a little while. Sometimes it's just because they don't have enough cash on hand for, a larger down deposit. So you just want to let them know what they're up against. Anytime I have an FHA buyer, if they're not in a situation where they have to move in the last like year and a half, I've just told them don't, just wait. There's no point right now. It's just because it can be really discouraging. So these are where things get a little weird. This is a specific scenario that I've been through, and it kind of went from easy to I want to cry. And I wanted to just take you through it and see what ideas you guys come up with. So your buyer client asks if they can move things over to their new property prior to closing. Buyer agents, what do you request? And if we had another group, we would ask what the sellers respond with, but your buyer needs to move their stuff in to a new property before they close. No, they have to. They're asking to because they have to. They got nowhere to go. They can't get a storage unit. Their home closed 2 days prior to their new purchase. I got nowhere to put my stuff. Or I lived in this home for 50 years. I got way too much stuff. I need time. I don't want to rent a storage unit. Can't, don't have anyone, all dead. Don't put your money out there. Well, no, 100, 150. When you're offering something like that, you never want to offer money out of your pocket. You want to say, pay for your storage and I'll give you credit at closing. However, you want to be careful. I've done that. And then they start sending their bill every month. Because what do you know? What if there's an extension? And then you've on the hook for paying for that. That's, you work hard for your money. We get paid well, but we work for it. You work real hard for it. Don't put your money out there. What you would ask for is a hold harmless agreement. So what you do is go to your seller client, your seller, and just say, hey, my co-broke, the listing agent, and just say, my client needs to move their stuff in early. Their deal's closing ahead of time, which is great. Their funds are going to be all ready for closing for our deal. Can I get a hold harmless agreement? What a hold harmless agreement is, and if you go into your coaching binder, there's contingency language on it. It's just allowing it's holding the seller harmless of any liability should anything happen to their things while they're in the home. So you would want to negotiate that. You'd usually have the attorneys write it up. We have contingency language that you could, but in mass where the attorneys are heavily involved, you'd probably negotiate that and then say, hey, would you like to write a hold harmless agreement, or would you prefer I just use a boilerplate? That's what they call them. They're called boilerplate addendums, boilerplate contracts. They're just like issued by the state. A bunch of attorneys got together and wrote them, and we just filled the blanks.
Is that different than a use and occupancy permit?
Yes, use and occupancy is when they're living there. Hold harmless is just moving their stuff. It's like using their new home as a storage unit. So you have a hold harmless agreement. They move their stuff in. Seller's cool about it. Totally fine.
And they're holding the seller.
Yes. So they're saying, I'm the buyer. I'm moving my stuff into your house. I'm buying your house. It's not mine yet. But if there's a flood, if there's a fire, if someone breaks into your house and steals my stuff, you're not liable for that. That's on me.
What if I'm an artist?
Mhm.
And I move all my painting and turpentine and stuff into the house, and something leaks, and something I move in damages the house now. Am I held? Does that whole harmless agreement work both ways? Because
I'm sure that it depends. There's boilerplate ones, and then there's attorneys that write ones. If you're working with an attorney that's more on like the I don't know what the word would be, kind of like the more conservative side of things, they would probably write language in there. If you have a client if you have a attorney that's kind of just, it really depends. I would think that they would want to add language in there, but this is where I stay in my lane. I don't write
my
them.
stuff could damage
It could.
their house before they sell it. Then I go to the locker room and say, geez, there's a big hole.
Yeah, it definitely could. And in that situation, you'd have to cross the bridge when you get to it. But if that's something where, you're thinking of that as an agent and you say, okay, you want to hold harmless agreement, talk to the attorney about it. Call and say, okay, well, if they move some stuff in and something that they move in damages their property, are my clients going to be protected? You can have that conversation with the attorney and they'll add it, And if that's something that you're like, you know what, I'm just going to put together a bunch of my own boilerplate addendums that I can just churn out from an attorney, reach out to an attorney and say, listen, I want to have some hold harmless agreements on hand. Would you mind working with me to put one together? And I would like buyer protection. The only thing is that you have to see if it's okay, where not every agreement, just because you send it over, they're going to sign. So if you have stuff like that in there, they might say, I'm not signing that. Seller says, I'm not signing that. Take that out, not signing it. And in that case, you have to ask your buyer, are you okay with that? Because you still need to move your stuff in early. You still have nowhere to go. So this is the risk you're running into. Again, there's risk in all situations, and that's a risk they might have to take on. We could try to mitigate it as best we can, but we really have to try and find a happy medium that works for both people. And that's really what our job is. And that's where the emotional aspect needs to be removed. So like, obviously, if I'm going to you, if I'm your buyer agent and I say, you know what, I'm going to add this piece in that protects you from any damage your property might do to their home. And then the seller says, no, then you have to go back to them and say, hey, we can't have that. There's no way they're gonna sign it. Your buyer's gonna be like, what? Like, they're gonna be angry. You can't take that energy and release it on the co-broke. Your job is to remain neutral. You have to explain to them, I understand, it's frustrating. However, they are allowing you to move your stuff in early. They don't have to say yes to that. They're willing to do that, but they're not comfortable with this clause of this hold harmless agreement. And that's a decision your buyer has to make. Then he might find a cousin or an uncle or something to move his stuff into, but that's where the negotiating takes
What's
place.
the pod cost?
I don't know. Honestly, I've not heard great things about them. They get lost a lot. They don't get picked up on time. I've had a lot of clients being like, you sold me this house a couple days ago, the pod's still on the front lawn. And it's like, what do you want me to do? So I don't think it's too bad though. So this is a moderately difficult situation. Your client calls you at 6 a.m, the morning of closing, and says that she needs help moving the rest of her things out before the 9 a.m. closing time. Upon arrival to the property, it's clear this will not be finished prior to the walkthrough and closing. This is the first closing of 4 connected closings. If this doesn't close, it will affect the next 3. What do you do? I know it's a lot, but this is the stuff you're gonna have to deal with.
What do you mean if it's not clear?
So I get there and there's no way we're gonna, in the 3-hour period we have left, buddy, it's not, because it's not your stuff. You can't touch it. It's not your stuff. They're asking you to help. And now there's one person that lives in this room and he says, don't touch my stuff and don't tell me what to do either.
But the owner of the property decides to come out.
Well, now the owner of the property is standing right next to the guy and she's saying, I don't know what to do. At this point, you need to just start communicating. Your job is to communicate and get this
So
moving.
So
My specific situation, this happened to me. I showed up, the house was trashed, not trashed, but when you move, it's not pretty.
But it's not her else, like the tenant.
No, it's her home.
Oh, so why, I mean, if it's her home, why can't she have authority over who?
I don't know.
but
She just doesn't. It's her son.
Your
She just
client
doesn't,
is.
her son doesn't want us touching anything of his, and he has not moved a single thing. His room is set up as if he was never moving, and we're closing in 2 hours.
Your client.
And you ask him, hey, could you help me? And he says, don't tell me what to do. What do you do? He's like, Frank, what do we do?
It's not legal. Okay. So the person who makes the phone call at 6 a.m. is the seller.
Yes.
They say, okay.
Yep.
And so they call their agent and say, we won't be ready.
They're calling me. They're calling you. They're
Okay,
calling
but
you at-
This is the buyer's side, so the buyer's.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but we're gonna communicate to the buyer side of things.
Okay, so then the listing agent calls you and says they're not gonna be out by 9 a.m.
Yes.
And obviously the client doesn't want to back out if they could and get their money back, right?
No, so this is a situation where they're like ready to go. Like, so the buyers probably have their stuff packed,
Right.
ready to move, ready to go. And this is the closing at 9. They're selling their home to buy another home.
Could the buyer sue?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's not a good
No.
solution, but that's.
Yeah,
a
we're all on our side, so I was confused.
We are on the buyer side, and I'm gonna explain how this is all interconnected.
Okay.
So and why this is more of relationship where this is how it's important that your relationship with your co-broke is good. So in this specific situation, if I did not know what to do, I had no idea. So I called and I said, listen, your buyers are obviously ready to go. We have closing at 9. I'm telling you right now, this is not going to be cleared for the walkthrough. Definitely not going to be cleared for closing. We can't push the closing because if we push this closing, it's affecting the purchase. So these are, sometimes you get on the buyer side of things and they have something to sell. So then you're having to deal with both. So in this specific situation, I'm helping these people buy something too. So not only am I communicating with the buyer agent on their listing, I'm communicating with the listing agent on their purchase. And I'm saying, hey, I don't know if we're gonna have the funds for closing in time because we're not gonna be able to close at 9. So because we can't close at 9, their purchase can't close. And because their purchase can't close, the people that are purchasing their property and selling them the home can't close. And then the people that are buying a property and selling, you get what I'm saying. It affects the entire day. It affects 4 different families in a million different ways. So I have to communicate on behalf of my buyers whose home is not going to sell as scheduled. And I have to communicate on behalf of them as my seller client to the buyers of that property to say, hey, I don't know what to do. These people aren't going to be out before closing. Luckily, luckily, I had a good relationship with the agent. She was another Keller Williams agent. She was awesome. I said, Debbie, I have no idea what to do here. And she said, Sarah, I've been in your exact situation before. This is what we can do. We'll do a holdback agreement. Have them come through. We'll do the walkthrough. And after the walkthrough, we'll come up with a number that works for everybody. A holdback agreement is when a portion of the seller's proceeds are held by the attorney's office and they aren't released until the buyer is okay with the condition of the property. So they're going to go ahead, they're going to close as scheduled. We're good to go. But
They're gonna get the key.
they're going to get the keys. No, well, they're not going to get the keys because we still have to move all the stuff out. So not only are we having to move, we're having to they still have to sign all the paperwork on their sale. They still have to sign all the paperwork on their purchase. We still need to coordinate and make sure that the funds from the attorney's office at their seller side is getting transferred in a timely manner to the attorney's office who's handling their purchase. So you're having to balance
So you
communication
quote-
with the attorney's
so you
office.
quote, The seller gets the funds from your buyer.
The seller gets the funds transferred over to their purchase. However,
Minus the holder.
minus the holdback agreement.
But they don't have to vacate the house?
No, they have a certain, so we've agreed. We've come up with an agreement that you'll get an extra 24 hours to get the rest of your stuff out.
Okay, so you're talking now, there's not there.
No, if it was a situation of days, then it's a situation of days, and then it could turn into a use and occupancy agreement. That's the difference. Holdback agreement's good for if it's like short, like this is something that it was the same clients that used, that moved their stuff in early to their home. So half their stuff was already moved. It was just really just not enough to get done prior to 9 a.m. By 9 p.m., great, not 9 a.m. So we negotiated, me and Debbie discussed a number that we thought was reasonable and fair. And verbally, we're like, good to go. I tell my transaction coordinator, hey, could you please write up this hold harmless agreement, this holdback agreement, so that we can get the next closing going, get the funds to where they need to go. She says, absolutely wonderful.
What happens if they don't clear it out within the 12 hours?
Then they don't get their money back. The buyer keeps
But they
that
don't have
holdback.
to- But they also don't have to leave the house.
Then it turns into a squatting situation. And then it turns into a situation where, okay, now do we have to do a use and occupancy agreement? So if we want to run with that, you're having to negotiate, okay, it's 9
Because
p.m.
your buyer has no place to live.
Well, they don't. And this is where it gets yucky. And so luckily in this situation, these people, and a lot of times people do this in this market, they were renters and they were first time home buyers. So they didn't like end their lease the day that they moved. So they weren't actually planning to move that day, which I knew ahead of time, which made it a little bit easier to negotiate. Had this been a situation where someone was closing on their house, didn't have anywhere to go, had a moving van full of stuff, had their family coming to help them move, that would have been a nightmare. That would have been like, I don't know what to
So there's
do.
another possible scenario, if they can't get out, you would hold that, you would give them an extra 12 hours. And Julie doesn't want to leave. Is there a point where the buyer could say, I want you out of the house and now your stuff is my stuff?
it would be a situation where at that point you'd want to step back and let the attorneys handle it. Sometimes, like in this specific situation, the attorney's asking me and Debbie to do the negotiating, because us as realtors, we're the only ones that have face-to-face contact with these people. The lender rarely meets them. The attorney meets them at the closing. If it's the same attorney, they speak with them on the phone, maybe a little bit, maybe through email. You're the only contact that they see face-to-face. So in this situation specifically, we had come to what I thought was good terms. We did the walkthrough. They said, oh, it's not as bad as we thought. I said, yes. I also committed to saying, I'm going to stay here until it's cleared out. You have my word that it'll be cleared out by 9 p.m. I'm not leaving until the property is cleared. So because of that, I think they were a little bit more trustworthy to allow the 12 hours. They had their reservations, but after seeing that it wasn't so bad, they were like, all right, no problem. So I'm thinking we're good to go.
But you can't help, so it's not your property.
Well, the seller's asking me to help at this point. Am I gonna have to deal with the friction between the son? Yes, absolutely. Part of our job is that we get to see the interpersonal relationships of families, and they're not always great. It's just part of dealing with
I
it.
mean, I could load up my pickup truck and help them, but.
In this
do I really
instance,
Want to get into that situation.
I did, but wait, well, we're gonna get there. So I pick up the 6D, we go for a ride to the closing table. It was in that conference room right over there. And after a solution is found to scenario 2, we're gonna do a holdback agreement. Buyer and seller agree to head to the closing table. Upon arrival to the closing table, the buyer states that they aren't comfortable moving forward unless a concession of $3,500 is given for new slider doors. So we're at the closing table, the attorney's sitting here, I show up. My plan is to drop the 6D off because we also are having to manage their purchase. So they were using a power of attorney to sign, so my clients weren't present at the closing table because they had to go over to sign papers on their purchase as my buyers. So I sent them to Bedford, said, please sign that. You have a POA over here. The attorney's gonna take care of all the signatures. And then I get there and they want $3,500 for new slider doors. This is coming out of nowhere. These people waived their home inspection. And again, I noted buyer waived home inspection. So at this point, does the buyer have a right to ask for that? No. Do you have to ask your client? Yes, you still have to ask them. Because if you say no on their behalf and they're like, I would have just paid the $3,500 to make this go away, that's on you if the deal falls apart. So you're required, just like you're required to present an offer, to let them know. At the table, well, let me see where I go from here. Okay, so at the table, I go and I start negotiating. They say the 3,500. I say, I'm telling you right now, my client is not going to agree to that. They didn't owe any money on the property. I said, she's told me herself that she will leave the property as is and never go back there. So there's no way. She's very frustrated. I understand. And it's hard because when your client is the first one to make the mistake, it's like chess. Like, it's like, I really don't have a leg to stand on because we broke the contract first. We were supposed to be out and now we're not. So we're modifying the contract for us. So the buyer's stance, wait, let me get through it, Frank. The buyer's stance is that they're saying, well, you broke the contract first. And now I see that I think the slider doors are a little sticky. I want new slider doors because you should be out. My answer,
The contract first,
the seller,
because
we weren't out in time. We didn't meet that date, that time.
so the two things don't have to be related.
No.
They're not leaving, has nothing to do with the slide.
Has absolutely nothing to do with slider doors. And this is where you want to have a good relationship with the co-broker, and luckily I did, because she obviously knows her client's being unreasonable. I obviously know my client's being a little unreasonable. So we're able to kind of put that aside and work together. Long story short, we negotiated for about an hour and a half at the closing table. The attorney said, I'm not putting this on record until you give me a formal holdback agreement and everything is good to go. Mind you, you're getting phone calls now because the buyers on their purchase, they're like, where's the funds for this? We can't close this until we have the funds for this. What's going on with this? Because my clients now can't purchase their home because they're having a hard time selling to your buyers because they don't have the money. Because this transaction hasn't closed, hasn't given the escrow time to be wired over to the attorney's office for purchase. So while you're fielding phone calls from the attorney's office on their purchase, you're having to deal with the situation in their sale. In this specific situation, I was able to play hardball because of the market that we're in and because this property was a very nice property. So I just said, listen, they don't have to buy it, but I need to know now. I said, it's 11 o'clock. We were supposed to close at 9. There's 3 other closings. At this point, they either want it or they don't. My client's okay if the deal falls apart. Let me know. Are we selling this or are we not? Because if we're not, I need to start making those phone calls to the other families that are affected by this. Luckily, the buyer came to, terms with the fact that he was being unreasonable, and we agreed to a holdback agreement. I forget the original number, but this is the scenario level 3. I want to scream. So at this point, you're having to balance the attorney's office for the next closing. They're calling you regularly to get an update on where the funds are for the next closing. So you have to keep this in mind because this is a buyer class and this is about their purchase. But to get them to purchase, you also have to be able to manage their sale and what's going on with their sale. So this is why it might be a little bit of a gray area where you're like, this is a buyer class, what are you talking about? But I can't make their purchase work if I can't make this work, because they need this in order to purchase. So the buyer and seller agree to a holdback agreement. It's sent out for signatures before the attorneys can record the deed. After checking in over a 2-hour period, the buyer states that they do not want to move forward unless a $2,500 holdback agreement is in place. The seller refuses to give the $2,500 and says they're fine if the transaction falls apart. The buyer says the seller breached the contract by not having their things out in time. So this is just repeated. I think it might be Jen. I don't know. She might be. I know you might get that hand. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. Don't be sorry. So the buyer at this point is having to say, he's being stubborn. He's saying, I'm not doing it without a $2,500 holdback agreement. For a 12-hour period, that's very high. That's unreasonable. It's a lot. So he also wants a $500 inconvenience fee for having to move. I know that he didn't have a moving truck, nothing like that, because we had the discussion up front when things were still a little bit more kosher. So in this situation, what do you suggest I do? They're at a stalemate, and this is where a deal can fall apart. This is where you've worked for 60 days, nonstop, showing the property, getting their purchase, and if this deal falls apart, then that deal falls apart. So you don't get paid for 2 deals. So a potential total gross commission of, I was netting about 16,000. So I would have lost out on $16,000 if this does not fall apart, if this falls apart. And I just did all that work for nothing. So what do you suggest at that point?
So you buy it. What are you, stupid?
That's what you want to say.
You gotta say to the buyer, how badly do you want this house?
And if you're in,
And then does this mean a lot to you? And then we have to start all over again.
and if your seller is also your buyer, you want to have that, because I'm selling her home in order for her to purchase
Okay.
this other home. So if I say to her, hey, you really want this home, you're buying it, you loved it, it's everything you wanted, are like the $2,500, like it's
You
not,
have the- You
and
have the funds to buy your next home.
and
you're
they
gonna let this
don't.
fall apart.
And also you want to take into consideration that it's not something they're going to keep. It's a $500 inconvenience fee and then a $2,500 holdback. So as long as we have the property cleared out in a good condition,
Get the money.
you get the money back. It's just, you have to have the hard conversation of, this is because you weren't out in time.
Right.
This is your own doing. You know what I mean? Like, I get it, things happen, mistakes happen, not a big deal, but at a certain point, you're gonna have to pay the piper. You didn't get out in time, and this is the consequence of that. We gotta pay an inconvenience fee, and we have to let some money be held back
And
to
again,
make
it's
sure.
a loan. It's not a
It's just
bill.
to ensure that no damage is done to the property while it's not ours anymore. And then if there is, there's funds to cover potential damage.
Is that how is that number arrived at?
Where you just come negotiate.
Okay.
You just
What is it
negotiate.
based on? It's a fear
It's
of
based on
damage,
time,
why-
like, yeah, I mean, realistically, if there's a licensed agent involved, really just depends. Really just depends.
What do you do with a buyer? Who, they're saying, they want 2,500. But that's not the issue. They just got cold feet and they've been looking for an excuse to back out.
Then that's
Exactly.
something that you have to you'll pick up on early, and you just have to let them know, at this point, it's tight, like, well, you're either gonna lose your deposit, because there's a lot of gray area there. Like, yeah, the seller is working with you to try and mitigate their issue, and you're not really working with them. Could they sue you to force you to buy the property? Potentially. You have a legal contract here. You could absolutely be forced to buy this property, pay a ton of legal fees. It's just not worth it, So like, at a certain point, you want to be reasonable. But in this specific situation, they were so stubborn. There was no moving them. They were not budging. The seller was not giving the 2,500. The buyer was not moving unless there was a 2,500 holdback agreement. So this is when it is most important to have a respectful and cooperative relationship with the other agent. At this point, it's like 1, 2 o'clock. We were supposed to close at 9 a.m. At this point, we have 4 hours to close 4 deals and get them all on record. Plus, you still have to go back to that apartment and help them move because you told them, you gave them your word that you were gonna have the place cleared out within 12 hours. So in this specific situation, me and Debbie took it from our commission. So I reduced my commission on the seller side. It's a holdback agreement. It's not, and this is where my money is involved, so I will be involved in making sure that the property is closed, is completely cleared out and not damaged. So me and Debbie was actually the one that thought of it. I'm not gonna take credit for it. She said, listen, I'll put up the $2,000. I'll put up the $2,000 for my commission. If we lose it, we lose it, but I highly doubt, because she trusted me. She said, I know that you're gonna make sure it's done, so I'll put up the 2,000. I agreed to split it with her. I said, no, I'll split it with you. And that means when I'm on the listing side of things, I have to modify my contract, my listing agreement, reduce it by a certain dollar amount. And then I also have to write an addendum for that holdback agreement, stating that it's coming from our commission and that it is to be released if there's no damages. Or if there's any damages, so I would get my commission back. Yes. So in this specific situation, it worked. They were like, great, no problem. We're going. Closed, boom, boom, boom. Every single transaction was closed before 5 p.m. and on record. That's when you know you're good at your job. So it was on record. I spent the night there. I had my husband come. My husband owns a deli. We had some guys that work for us come and help us move everything out. And I went back in the morning. I sweep the floor and I met them for their walkthrough. And we did offer, I think me and Debbie took like a $200 hit for a cleaning person because there was a situation that was just gross. So, and I didn't want to touch it. So we paid for a cleaning person. And that was okay. So I'll eat. And this is where you want to always be thinking bigger picture when you're negotiating. You don't always want to put yourself in a situation like this. I'm comfortable doing it because I've been doing this for long enough to know that if I say I'm going to do something, it's getting done. Where you're newer, I wouldn't put your money up like that. And there are probably experienced agents that are like, you're insane. I would never do that. But in my perspective, am I going to let the stubbornness of two people cut me out of my money that I worked for? No way. I will take a $2,000 hit to make $14,000 over nothing. It's just silly. You know what I mean? You want to take into consideration. This is where it's very important to remove your emotional aspect from this. It was I was angry. I was angry, but I could not let my client know that I wanted to lose my mind. I was ready to just lose it, but I couldn't. And that's where the job is difficult. And that's a little about negotiation. Did you get enough from that? It's a lot, but this is just situations that I want to show you guys. This is where your value is added. So when people tell you, hey, why would I pay you? Imagine if she didn't have me in that situation. Imagine if her clients, if her buyers of her property, she was a for sale by owner, buyers of her property show up and she could have got screwed. She could have got absolutely screwed. But because she had me and because she had a trustworthy agent on the buyer side, we were able to get her top dollar for her listing, get the deal to close, and make everybody happy. And that's ultimately the goal.
How old was the kid that said, don't tell me what to do?
Kid, he was a grown man with a child.
Still winning at home.
But it is what it is, and you can't really judge their situation. For me, honestly, I've been at showings where, and this is like a little bit about what we talked about yesterday. Like I've been showing properties and negotiating on deals that like there's friction between a couple. You know what I mean? Like people that buy that aren't married and they're like having cold feet about that. Like, oh, we're not married. Like, is this something we really want to do? And then they fight. So I actually just recently spoke with a lender that's been doing it for like 20 years. And he was explaining how lenders get paid and like, you know, what they like that whole system. And he said, you guys get paid the way you do because you're the psychologist. You guys have to deal with everything. Whereas for us, for the lending side and even on the attorney side, like the attorney is more involved in mass. But most of the time, if there's a problem that needs to be negotiated or there needs to be like feet on the ground problem solving, the attorney is not doing it. They're calling you. They're going to say, hey, I need you to do this.
Well,
Or, hey, I don't know what you want to do to fix this, but this is the situation. Specifically in this situation, I called the attorney and she knew that the client was being unreasonable. And I said, he's being unreasonable. Like, I don't know, there's no fixing this. And she said, I understand, but there's nothing we can do. Your client broke the contract. She was right, but she's not really there for the resolution. She's just there to say, what do you want me to do? I'm trying to tell this guy that he's being unreasonable. He's not listening. So figure it out.
That attorney works for the bank. So when you start negotiating things like, again, staying in your lane as a realtor, you tell the client on either side, you need to get an attorney that represents you.
Our goal is to always keep them out of litigation. It costs them a ton of money.
Well, you don't have to go to litigation just if you have a lawyer.
Yeah, but it's also, this is where you're trying to de-escalate. That's your job. You're trying to de-escalate the situation. Am I gonna tell you, go get an attorney,
Well, who
screw
writes the
these
whole
people?
house agreement? Who writes the use and occupancy?
She had us listing, because if your seller is selling, she needs, I always recommend using a separate attorney to write the deed and do, there's usually like a fee or whatever they do the deed. I always recommend they get their own counsel for this specific situation.
But their own counsel, a real, like, Mitch Weiss.
Yeah.
Not a litigator.
No,
Lambert, by the way, that is Penn, you mentioned.
Paul Lambert, yeah. Yeah, Tony Popolo is a litigator, but he's also done he's done like deeds and stuff like that. And I like to have him, a lot of times I recommend him to my sellers because if things do happen, Tony's already a litigator. You know what I mean? He's already gonna be on it.
But if you referred your seller to Mitch,
Mhm.
he could handle that, correct?
Yeah, he would, but it would be with you. It's not like he's gonna be like, all right, Frank, take a seat. I'll take care of this. He's gonna be like, all right, this is the situation. This is what I need you to do, or I don't know, you need to talk to them. Go have a conversation with them and
But
let me
they're
know
the
what they
ones that
think.
Write the documents. And
They're the one that are, well, it depends. It depends. Sometimes they do, sometimes they have you do it.
And then I'll give it to them.
Well, sometimes part of your job is writing these contracts. I mean, it is what it is.
Again, staying in your lane.
Yeah, but you're taking it too literally. Stay in your lane as far as
Well,
like,
yeah, that's-
you're just taking it too literally. You just have to say like, do you want my help? Don't jump in without discussing it. And this is where it's a team effort. Every step that I made here, every decision that I made for my client, I talked to my client first, the attorney first, and the lender. Everyone was involved. It was never like, Sarah said this, so let's go. It was like, Sarah called the lender, Sarah called the client, Sarah called the attorney to make sure that this would be a good move, and then we went with it. So it's not something that's like, it's a collaborative effort. And when their attorney is trying to balance the funds moving around in the actual closing, they're only one person. They can't be doing the closing and this. So they're gonna give it to you. They're gonna say, you need to deal with this. I can't do both. So I'm gonna handle the closing. I'm gonna get it ready so that we can just put it right on record when you resolve it. And if it's not gonna be resolved, you need to let me know. And that's that. That's where you stay in your lane. So you're saying, hey, this is my resolution. Does it work? Great.
Suggested resolution.
Huh? Suggested resolution, but it's ultimately, it's about marketing and selling. And if there's is a situation where, these two people can't come to an agreement about like, still being happy about selling to this buyer and buying from the seller, then that's your job. That's your job to deal with that.
How old was the guy the buyer who insisted on the 2,500 bucks?
He was, I don't really know. It was a first time home buyer. They're really nice up until that point. But it was, it's a highly emotional process. So as far as like your stay in your lane stuff, obviously I preach about that. You want to stay in your lane, but it's also communicating. At a certain point, this is again a team effort. It's a collaborative effort. And if we're not collaborating for everyone that works for this client, we're all working for the same person.
Right.
So you want to have a discussion with
Like
them.
I said yesterday when we were talking about tracing back the title, when you look up the deed, you just kind of see if there are any easements because you don't want them.
I wouldn't even touch that until the attorney told me there's a problem. Then I would look at it.
See, again, that's,
But then and at a certain point, you have to take like, for instance, in that specific situation that I discussed yesterday in the property in Lawrence, I could have said, this is not my job. This is not my job, but I'm a good agent and I want the house to sell. So I took it as far as I could take it. And then I called the attorney who, in my opinion, was not performing. And I said, listen, respectfully, because she called and said, hey, how's that going? And I said, this is not my job. I said, I emailed you everything I could. Respectfully, this is for you to do. It's not for me to do. I've done more than I should have already. This is me reiterating my boundary and staying in my lane and saying, I've helped you because I want to help my client, but do your job.
because I mean, I used to trace those.
Yeah.
So
And so she said, okay, no problem. Thank you very
to go
much.
find that
And she did it.
when I'm looking up the name is no big deal. And if I see something that I'm not gonna say this is a red flag, it would be a conversation with the bank's attorney, I guess.
But the bank's attorney isn't gonna take, they're gonna be like, Frank, why are you looking this up? This is for us to do.
How
We'll let
about-
you know if there's a
yeah, but you
problem.
Wait too long to do it, according to Mitch, or just say to the buyer's agent, oh, by the way, I found this thing there, where
You mean the seller?
the seller.
They're gonna say, this is not your job. That's what they're gonna tell you if you do that. They're gonna be like, listen, you're not the attorney. This is not, I'm not, they're not gonna pay attention to it. They're either gonna ignore you flatly, or they're gonna say, until I hear it from the attorney, because it's from, we don't have a bar license. It's not our job.
But like I said, Amber, the Sterling and Amber told me.
They do
So
it
they
too
found
late.
out- They found out at the closing.
They do. And ultimately, we can see flaws in the process, but it's not our process. It's the attorney's
Okay.
process. So that's really what it is. So like, we have our processes here at Keller Williams and as realtors, and we can control that. So if you came to me and said, this process is stupid, I don't like it, we have a little bit of control. We're part of a board. You could go to the board of realtors and say, hey, I don't like this process. It doesn't make sense. That's our lane. As far as the title and when they do that, how they do that, that's their process. We can certainly suggest it, but I can tell you right now, they're gonna tell you to F off. They're gonna be like, you don't have a bar license. Don't tell me how to do my job. So you want to try and find a nice, and this is again, you can be thinking that. You can be thinking this is stupid. You should have done this earlier, but you can't say that. You have
But
to
if it
find
comes
a
up at
polite
closing, I
way.
say, yeah, I knew that. But I mean.
You
when I
might
was
do it for-
practicing engineering, I had people tell me how to do engineering from all walks of life. So it's like now payback.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly, and there's nothing stopping you from doing that. For me, I'm always looking at every opportunity, and this is where you have to wear multiple hats. And real estate is, I'm always thinking of my long-term business. I'm a business owner at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, that's all I'm thinking about. If, sure, I could think that this attorney is not amazing, and I think that I'm maybe having to do their job, or maybe they're not doing things in a timely manner, but I value my business, so I want to remain respectful, and I want to make sure that while I can address my concerns with them, it's in such a way that they're not like, I hate working with this lady, I'm never referring her business, and I don't want to deal with any of her contracts. So that's just where you want to kind of find a finesse and a light pressure, which is only found from experience. The way I handled this is not the way I would have handled it when I first got my real estate license. The deal would have probably fallen apart. But because I have experience and I've got, more than 50 deals under my belt, I know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? I know where I can. You just learn from experience is really all it is. My goal in sharing the negotiations with you is that you gain a little bit of my experience and just if you're ever in that situation, I want there to be like a think like, oh God, I remember when Sarah talked about this, let me call her. Because my dad did that for me. There were situations that my dad was in that he would give me a heads up ahead of time, or I would remember him telling me about it, and I would be like, oh God, like I remember the situation and it looks like that's gonna happen here. Let me get ahead of this. Sorry, I just wanna make sure it's not my son's school. Hello? Hello? Is this a joke? Sorry, I thought it was from Rivera. I thought that might have something wrong with my family. My father-in-law has COVID. I do not. I got tested. I'm negative. So we're gonna move it along to, I know I'm recording. Guys, I'm safe. I'm not German up the place. There's like 4 people in there, I think. So this is the contracts and disclosures, and this is really for Brian because he had some questions about basically the contracts process. And this is going to kind of go over strictly just what contracts in what order they go in. This is something that moving forward, Debbie's going to focus on because she is like a G with compliance. She is just knows it like the back of her hand. She spends all of her time. She doesn't use a transaction coordinator. She does all of it herself. I use a transaction coordinator. I leverage that piece of my business, but it's important that you know how to do it. Debbie will reiterate it in a way that I cannot. She's just better at it than me. So moving forward in this class, this will be a Debbie thing, so it's going to look different. But for now, I'm going to show you what I have. So when you're on the buyer side of things, there's contracts that you'll be reviewing, and these are all contracts that are required that you'll need. These are not, there's Keller Williams forms that I don't have on here. This is just the state required forms. There's some other forms that I think have been updated since then that I missed on here, and this is why Debbie's better at this than me. These are the mass required forms for buyers. There's also like a lot of this is more for sellers. So like a listing inclusions and exclusions. There's the wire and audio form. In your binder, you have all of them. Yeah, and in your binder, you have all of them.
Oh, I was.
You have all of them. So if you go to the seller and buyer section of your binder, it has every single contract that you need, and Debbie's gonna be doing her group coaching on her end and be going through them line by line with you.
And the contract.
Yep, they're already in there. And she's gonna have you say, okay, Brian, or class, whoever, however setting she's doing it in, she's gonna say, pull out this contract where this is what we're doing today. And she's gonna do that over an 8-week period starting next week. So what is our role as agents? It's our job to know these contracts very well and guide our clients to the best of our ability. It is crucial that as agents, we understand what our role is and when to refer to the expertise of an attorney. We kind of dance on the line of practicing law, which can be scary. Andy Consoli preaches that a lot. There's a lot of gray area where, you know, I like the way Andy delivers it. He says that realtors blind to get access to these contracts to do them, but it makes sense that we have them because attorneys are busy and they're doing things on a higher level, and they give us boilerplate contracts where we're just filling in the blanks. And an attorney is there to review that and build their purchase and sales off of the contract to purchase. So you do have some guidance from an attorney. In New Hampshire, it gets a little weird, but we're not going to talk about that. So this is a class I would normally teach with Attorney Popolo. So this is where I would have an attorney come in. Moving forward, it's just going to be Debbie, because Debbie knows her stuff like she's an attorney. So I heavily rely on attorneys when I do transactions because I firmly believe in staying in my lane. And most attorneys really don't want a ton of realtor involvement in the state of Mass. In New Hampshire, it's a different story, but in Mass, once you do the contract to purchase, you move it to the attorney. And if they have any questions, I push them to the attorney. Up until that point, you do have to feel comfortable enough to explain what they're signing though, because they're not going to read line by line. They may, but most of the time they're relying on your expertise to know these contracts, to give them a heads up on what they're signing, because you've hopefully at that point built trust enough for them to trust that you know what you're talking about. So the first step is the buyer agency disclosure. It's important to present this state mandated disclosure at the first meeting with a buyer or seller. Did we ever get confirmation? Remember last time? It was like, is it at the first meeting or is it the first conversation? I think it's at the first business
I
meeting.
heard
First business
it
meeting.
was the first face-to-face.
Business meeting. Because sometimes, and I recommend it just for your own.
But I also heard, and I haven't seen this written, was, you know, I gave the example of you're at a bar, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have them in your car.
It's the presumption of doing business.
Mhm.
So if you talk to somebody and you're having a conversation about real estate, specific to, and they bring up. their
Specific to a property.
You sit there and, you know, you can still have that conversation. Because you weren't in a situation where it's a presumption of doing business,
Yeah.
but you better get it as soon as possible.
Mhm.
I haven't seen that written anywhere, and I haven't seen any decision.
I always like to err on the side of caution. So I like to just get it out there immediately. A lot of times you'll see in the attachment, so someone might say like in their email, in their signature of their email, of every email they have the attached disclosures. So that way, every single time they send an email, so if you're at a bar and you start striking up a conversation, this guy's like, hey, I got $1 million property in Boston. I hate my realtor. You want to sell it? You can say, give me 1 minute. And you could just send them an email and say, hey, this is a disclosure. And then you just have the conversation with them.
So you send them the email, they don't have to respond, you just send it.
Yeah, you sent it and they're signed. There's also a line, a checkbox to
If
say
they
if
don't sign,
they,
don't have their phone because they-
you have to present it to them. And so if you can say like, I'll send it to you through DocuSign to sign, but you have proof in an email that you sent it to them. And that it's a paper trail to say, I sent this to them, I presented it to them. They don't need to sign it immediately. They don't have to sign it at all. It's not a contract. It's a disclosure. It's so that you're,
Especially if he's had too many, the person's had too many drinks, then you're simply just not.
yeah. So realistically, that's like a very out there situation. But for instance, if you're like these are why they need to be out in an open house. If you cover open houses, these need to be out there because you need to be able to tell them, I don't represent the seller personally. My team does. However, if you need representation, you're unrepresented as a buyer, I would love to help you. I can be your buyer agent. I can be your designated agent. I'm not the listing agent on this property. And here's the difference between these things. What I like to do is when I present these out, I usually say, right now you're considered a customer. And this is a explanation of buyer agency, seller agency, dual agency, facilitation, and designated agency. to become a client of mine, you have to sign a buyer agency contract. So that way you're formally hiring me. I also like to throw in, I understand you may be uncomfortable with contracts. However, it's the only protection I have from spending my time with you in order to protect my time. I don't get paid unless you buy a home. It's okay if you never do. It's okay if you figure out the situation isn't for you, you don't want to buy, but it's the only thing stopping you from saying, oh, my cousin just got their real estate license. I'm gonna go work with them now after I've been working with you for 6 months. That's the conversation I usually have.
I've got a brother who I think is gonna be selling his house.
Yeah, you were telling me in
This
Portsmouth.
is a different
Oh, wow, lots of brothers.
one. And it's in a trust and I'm the trustee.
Okay,
I keep trying to tell him things he needs to start doing. And
So.
basically he's gotta declare.
Yeah.
Because I'm the trustee and I'm the person who's got to sign it. But I'm talking to him. Do I need to give him one of those?
that's where if I would talk to the estate attorney. I don't think so,
I got one opinion.
because realistically, you're the one that's gonna be making the decision, no?
I got one opinion that says I don't have. to.
And I don't think you would, because it's like a similar to like a for sale by owner or a private sale. Like you're the one that is the
Oh,
decision maker.
I'm not gonna handle it. I want.
No, but
I
you'd
have
be-
a bill to do.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't really need to be doing that. And like realistically, like if it's your brother or your sister, like
Oh, I'll more like one.
I know. for me, you
You know
know,
how families can get.
you could, I mean, you should do it every time. Like you're working with your dad right now. He needs this. So you give this to them. I like it as a nice segue into, here's the buyer agency contract too. Right now, you're a customer. I want you to be my client. And that's how I give it to them. So, so it's a buyer agency contract with consent to designated agency. This is a contract between the brokerage and the buyer. The duration of the contract is laid out as well as compensation. This contract also states what designated agent from the brokerage is representing the buyer. Duration can vary depending on the buyer's needs. I write that because in the beginning of my real estate career, I was very adamant about having people sign for a certain period, a certain duration of time. You don't need to do that. You want to kind of think it on, again, a situational basis. If I'm working with a real estate investor who has cash and is like, I want to buy this house right now, I'll use you. I'm not going to press them over a 3-month contract. I'm going to make it specific to this property, and then I'm going to do so well that they're going to want to hire me. That's how you should act. You don't want it to be like scaring people away. You want to protect your time, and say you get into this and it's with this one property, and you discover this investor isn't as solid as I thought, and this doesn't work, and then the deal falls apart. You don't have to work with them again either. You know,
No,
you don't have to
if
sign a
they-
release or anything. So it's
If
not
you
really just
sign
their
it
property.
for a specific property, and then that falls apart.
So does your
then you give
contract.
them Then you give them a contract and you say, look, we're going to do it for 3 months. and it's
Yeah.
gonna get serious.
Yes, yes. So, and so that's like kind of a nice way. And sometimes they don't care. Sometimes they're like, yeah, sure, 6 months contract, don't care. Totally fine. And in this market, it wouldn't be unheard of to have like a year. Like there are people who look for years. I've have clients that have been looking for 2 years for property, and they're not bad clients. They can afford up in the mid 3s, but they're just, this market's nuts. So in this, it's gonna kind of, I have them like kind of laid out on, this is just gonna basically show you the, and next time, so when Debbie does this, bring your binder, because it'll be much easier for you to have those contracts in place. It's just gonna basically break out between, they're hiring Keller Williams. They're not hiring you, they're hiring Keller Williams. And then they're naming you as the designated agent. There's usually no success fee, but this is where there's been issues in the past. There is a line that specifically states what they owe you as far as a percentage. And you usually get paid through the seller in the MLS. But if you are, for instance, going to charge, like I charge 3% for buyers across the board, the sellers agreed to pay me 2%. You need to have the discussion with your buyer client about the fact that they're going to have to come to the table with the extra 1%. That's coming out of their pocket. That's going to be part of their closing costs. So you want to have that conversation up front so that when you get paid through the MLS, it is clearly communicated to your buyer. So it's not a closing table issue, because at that point, they're going to be like, what do you mean? You told me that I was paid for it through the seller. You want to have the conversation up front. If you're going to do that is, you know, hey, I charge 3%. So if they're only going to give me 2 or 2.5, you're going to owe me a point or a half a point. And that's just a
You can
conversation
waive
I have.
that. Because let's say.
You
they
could certainly
overpay-
waive it.
Let's say they.
Don't
overpay
have any
something.
money. Yeah, that you could say, it's your contract to do what you want with it.
They Keller Williams won't have a problem.
No, it's for you to negotiate. So if you, like, for instance, I have some cousins who, they gave me 2 listings, so I did it for 3%. If they weren't my cousins, I would have never done that, never. But they're my cousins and I love them and they gave me 2 listings. So I took 1% and gave the buyer agent 2. I could have taken 2 and had them work it out with their buyer, but for me, it was my cousins and they were both estate sales. I didn't want to, like, I just wanted it to be appealing. I wanted it to move
And of
fast
course, it
for
would
them.
be unethical to do the home show, to not show houses. that are for sale by you.
Yeah, no, for sale by owners are kind of, that's the situation too, where you want to talk to them about this. You always go to the for sale by owner first and ask, are you gonna pay a buyer fee? But most of the time they are, they're not stupid, especially if you're getting them off of Zillow or something. They're putting it out there knowing that people with agents are gonna come look at it. Most for sale by owners are okay with paying the buyer fee. They don't want to pay, they're trying to save money, but they're not stupid. Obviously, they would prefer a private sale. They prefer someone with no agent. But if they have somebody with an agent, which is most buyers, that's, that's where you want to have that discussion. If they say, oh, no, I'm not paying a buyer fee, I'm not paying for a realtor at all. If they want to use you, they can pay for it. Then you have to have that conversation with your
Why did
clients.
why did you say you go to your fiscal first?
Because you want, it's traditional that the seller would pay for the commission because the buyer's already coming to the table with their closing costs plus their down payment. So they're coming out of their pocket with a lot of cash. You want them to pay for the representation too, because when you're
No, you said
working,
You go to the fiscal first. before you-
I would go to the for sale by owner and ask them to cover the commission
Oh, so you
first.
have to-
Yeah, to
and if
cover
they
the
say
commission.
no, just
Then
say,
you have the conversation with your buyer.
Well, here's a house, it's what you want, but you're gonna have to pay me.
Yes, per my contract. And this is another thing where you want to set the expectation up front. Don't have that conversation when you're looking at a FISBO. Have that conversation when you meet with them. Talk with them, say, hey, my commission's 3%. Most of the time, that's covered by the seller. However, there's a chance that they won't cover the full 3%. And in that case, you're gonna have to cover the difference. They may be okay with that. Usually they have no idea how things traditionally work. Some agents don't do that. Some agents only take what's in the MLS. They don't charge the difference.
So you can't put per MLS,
You could.
then you can't put a fiscal, then it's not gonna be, yeah.
So it's better to put a percentage in.
I like situation, I wouldn't charge that.
For
I saw like $5,000, you gotta put it into like all the costs of attorney fees.
like
Me, I'm saying,
yeah,
I would-
until you've done a deal.
I got
And
one-
then you're like,
I
no,
got
you're
one
paying me.
that had percentage, like,
Most of the
family.
time, your family is happy to pay you because they do understand. And if they don't, they catch on really quick how much work it is. Because it's not,
Like, they're not gonna know, I could like say 3%, I told my baby, the attorney fees, like, everything closing costs. They're not gonna know it's like, they're gonna just pay me.
but you want to own your value. Don't go in there with the like, oh, well, it's this, that, and the other thing. Say, I provide a lot of value. I'm going to negotiate to the best of my ability to make sure you get exactly what you want. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to set you up for your real estate goals. I want to make sure that you're set for the trajectory of your lifetime in this home. And I want you to come back and I want you to refer me business. And I can guarantee that I'll be worth every penny. That needs to be the attitude you're walking in with. You can't walk in with the whole, like, smoke and mirrors. There's just money everywhere. Just give me money. You want to be upfront and be confident. Be confident. But I know what you mean, because that's something I would have done in my early career. I would have been like, oh, well, it's escrows and prepaids, because you don't want to have that direct conversation.
No, I would tell them, just saying, I don't wanna like take that 1%, is what I'm trying to say. Like, I would actually tell them, okay, this is what you got to pay me, but I don't wanna add that 1% to it just because of that.
Yeah. Okay. So you could do that. So if you get to the point where there's an MLS and you're only getting paid 2%, and then there's that 1% remaining, you could adjust your exclusive buyer agency agreement to say 2%, instead of 3%. You could do that. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Me, I only take what's in the MLS. I'll do it for like 2. I usually do 2. And then if it's more, great.
You just said you already did.
No, that was an example. Me personally, I do it for that, but we have to be careful. We can't really talk a ton about what we charge because it's antitrust laws. Antitrust laws. It varies, obviously. The situation's different case by case. It really does vary. I don't charge the same commission across the board every time. It's situational, depends on the circumstances. Sometimes if someone's coming to me and they're wanting me to sell them 3 properties, yeah, I might
Well,
figure
you
something out
adjust-
that works for them because I want all
Do
three.
you adjust the commission based on how much the property is?
That's a
Because
net thing.
one of the brokers that I almost went to work for, probably what they typically charge, he said, but if it's a $5 million property,
Yeah,
you might drop the percentage, because,
it's a higher value.
you know, I mean, how much you get in the pocket? And then I suggested that here to a couple of agents.
Different
No,
everywhere.
you
It's
never
different
do.
everywhere. It's
Yeah.
different everywhere. That's where it's like, it really depends. Like, someone like Jeffrey might be like, no way, don't care. No, this is what I charge, period. Where
Is
you're
that-
new, getting into the business, I can throw a little bit more weight around. I've been doing it longer. I can say no, and I'm confident when I tell people, like, yes, I'm very good at my job. So when you hire me, you're getting every single penny's worth and you're gonna be happy you hired me.
What is the difference between selling a $5 million luxury property and selling $500,000? I
Really,
heard it's a specialty, and I'm going, isn't the process the same? What is the difference?
I wish I could tell you, I've never sold a $5 million property. If I did, man, I would be, whew. I'd be happy. I'm gonna though. I've sold them. I try to manifest it, put it out in the universe. I'm gonna sell a $5 million property. I would think that the process would be the same. But if we wanted, we could even, this is where I like when I have these classes with you guys, because we could get a luxury specialist in here. We're in Andover. We could
I've
easily
asked
get
that
someone in
question,
and get
I've
them in here,
never-
see.
I've asked that question several times, and I have never gotten.
I think that there's likely, yeah, there's, for 5 million, yeah, for 1 million, I think the commission is 40. So for 3, yeah, for 5, yeah.
6%.
But that you split that with the buyer agent.
That's okay.
Without 6%.
So it's like whatever percentage goes.
So that's
But I would like to know what's the difference.
I would think that the attorneys handle the process a little bit more. I would think that the purchase and sales agreement would be a little bit thicker. Just like in a situation like a new construction process is significantly different than a regular standard sale. I think it really depends. Again,
I'd
situational.
like to know, yeah.
I would like to know that
Yeah,
too.
yeah, check a class on that.
Yeah, I'll talk
New
with Jamie for
construction
sure.
versus new construction
Well, John
versus-
Marin does a great new construction class. I have experience with new construction just from my past experience. The team I was on exclusively sold for a builder in Pelham. So I know firsthand a good chunk about new construction is very different and it's very risky for a buyer, but in this market, it's not that bad. Well, then we had
How
COVID and the
much is
material
for a buyer
cost and
If the contractor goes belly up and doesn't finish the project.
in new construction, the deposit's non-refundable, no matter what. Doesn't matter. Because the builder, think about it from the builder perspective. You're gonna give me $20,000 and I'm gonna put 300,000 of my own money in it. If you decide to dip, or you decide, oh, this is not working for me, or your financing falls apart, I'm taking that money because I had to
Right.
use it to build. You know, they're not taking it and letting it
But
sit
what
in an
if the
escrow account.
contractor Reaches the point.
It's usually a contract that is written in heavy favor of the builder. So they're usually like this thick and there's usually very limited buyer protection. Because they really are taking on most of the risk, the builder, they are. Because if you get into in this market, no, because they could sell it like hotcakes, you know, like whether it's, they build a home custom to exactly what you want. And then you don't buy it, they have to go, they're out that money and they have to go find someone else to sell it to. And in this market, sure, it's easier, but you just built this custom to what you wanted, you know? And what if you did a 25,000, like sometimes they start at a base. So say it starts at like 389 for this tier of property, then 489 for this tier of property, and then 589 for this tier of property. That's not like gonna stay like that. There could be like, okay, I want the 589, but I also want you to add this beautiful sunroom where the porch would be. Okay, well, that's a $25,000 add-on. It's never just that. There's always add-ons. You want a fireplace? You want a blower so that the heat will blow out? That's another $1,000. It's small stuff like that. I only offer, you know, these 3 lighting samples. If you want anything more, you're gonna have to buy it. Give it to me. I'll put it in. So these are all things that are different in a builder contract. And there is situations where the builders aren't good. And then unfortunately, it's not like they can get their money back. The builder probably already spent it. So that's where the risk to the buyer in a new construction situation is higher, but that's where you, as their agent, should be doing research on the builder and asking for references and doing your due diligence to make sure you're not putting your client in a situation that's like crappy. For instance, I had clients who wanted new construction in Chester, New Hampshire. We went It seemed odd to me. I was lucky enough that I had the experience in new construction, so I knew that it was off. But if I was like a newer agent, you'd have no idea. You know what I mean? You're new. You don't know what you don't know. So because there was no, like, it was just off. There was no information on what add-ons cost. There was no sort of spec drawing to see what the property might look like. There was no sort of plan. It was just red flags to me, stuff that, like, things that when I'm meeting the listing agent, if they're not coming with a ton of material on this new build, like, you're building a new community, why don't you have more material on what it's gonna look like? What is landscaping gonna look like? Are you doing walking trails? Where's the septic? Where, are we, a bunch of information is just missing. And I'm asking for it and I'm not really getting it. And they're saying, no, we can't give it to you unless you put a holding fee down. And it's like, what? And then I started doing some research on the builder, and they've been working on that project for 2 years. There've been people that have been waiting for 2 years to get into their home, and they were getting sued. So I was able to tell my clients that. Luckily enough, because I knew that something was off. If I was a newer agent and didn't do my due diligence, I could have said, okay, great. Yeah, you guys like this place. Let's put the holding fee down. Let's get this, then we'll get the information. And then you're in a situation where you have to sign a contract, and then you have to get out of that contract somehow if things don't go right. And that holding fee is gone. So this is just situations where it's different across the board. John Marin teaches a great new construction class. He does a lot of stuff like that. And he teaches a lot about how to get builders for listings. To like go look at land, figure out, all the math behind that. I have it on the PC coaching drive or in the KW training. I think both. He taught a class that just basically showed that. It was really interesting, but I'm getting lost. The exclusive buyer agency contract is that it's you getting hired as a client. There's a ton of information in here. Debbie is going to go over it with you line by line. You have it in your coaching binder. That's going to be her thing.
When is Debbie going to do your class?
She's doing an 8-week program this is for the productivity coach, the business development program. So she's going to be doing her weekly group coaching for the next 8 weeks, starting next week. And she's going to supplement that with some one-to-one coaching and some classes.
This is different than your coach.
Different. I'm more on like business development, how to grow your network, how to get more business. She's on how to be compliant. These are the contracts. And we do, some of our stuff does blend, like she's going to talk to you about negotiating. I'm going to talk to you about negotiating. She's going to talk to you about, I'm going to show you how to present.
Knowing the how to know. That's sound right. I think I'd be better off in her class.
I think you'd like Debbie's class because Debbie has a lot more. Debbie does all of her transactions. She's in the compliance stuff. I haven't done that in like 2 years. I've had a transaction coordinator for 2 years that deals with all of that for me. So yes, I know it, but I'm not in it every day. My focus, and it allows me to focus more on how can I help you build your business while she can focus on this is how you properly in a compliant way run your business. And it's just kind of like added value.
How do I say that?
Jamie's here actually right now, so I would speak with Jamie about it ahead of time. Yeah. So this is the contract to purchase. So you show them the property. They're your
What's the
clients
cost,
now.
by the way?
What happened?
What's the cost of it?
The business development program?
Her program.
It's all one. We'll talk about it after class. I'll talk with you about it. So the initial contract to purchase is submitted as an offer to purchase a subject property. This contract will lay out the timeline, financing, deposits, and inspections. Be sure to communicate with the lender and attorneys for realistic dates for financing and purchase and sales deadlines. There's obviously standards, like me and you are filling that out. Usually within 10 to 12 days, we'll have the purchase and sales done. Could that change? Yeah. If there's an issue with the inspection, it's going to be extended. If we get the inspection done earlier and there's no problems, we could get it done earlier. These are all things that are very case to case. Oh no, I was just waving at you.
Oh, you guys are just waving.
Just waving.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
Oh, that's all right. How's it going?
Wonderful. I'm going over this briefly and I'm telling them Debbie's going to do it from now on because she's
Yeah.
excellent at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 100%, 1-to-1, whatever you need.
Yeah. I'm going to go over these. We're just going over these briefly,
Good.
over more how to present them. And then if they have any questions, Debbie's going to start her weekly thing next week and they
Start
can
next week.
schedule one-to-one.
Okay.
Well,
Wednesday.
I think it's
I believe
Wednesdays.
Wednesdays.
I
Yeah.
have he wants to talk to you about the business development program,
Go,
Frank.
go. Frank. Oh, I was like. go.
Oh.
Frank, yes. I know. I'll let you guys be.
Thanks. So, this is the offer. So when you're like, someone says, okay, I want to put an offer on the property, contract to purchase is the offer. It's gonna have a timeline
And
of
you have to present the lead paint form before this contract.
if it was built prior to 1978.
So this is the contract, because we talked about that.
Yeah, so, and that will be in the MLS. So when you go in the MLS, and this is another thing that Debbie's gonna show you, we'll kind of cross bounds, but she's gonna go in depth in the MLS. So when you view this property, like when I go and show a property, I'm printing the listing sheet, I'm printing the property disclosures, I'm printing anything that's attached in there so they can have it, or I'm at minimum emailing it to them. I like to have a hard copy just because it makes, I don't know, maybe because I'm old school and I don't know. I like to have a hard copy. But you want to have all that up front. So as far as the lead paint form goes, that's something that if this is a property that you're showing, should be given away ahead of time. They should at least know that that's a thing. You give them that, they're okay with it, great, don't care that they don't know that there's lead paint in the house, even, don't buy the house. That's what I would say. If you're not comfortable with that situation with lead paint, let them know, only buy houses that were built after like 1980. Because realistically, any home built prior till 1978, or like Frank likes to say, if someone, there's really no knowing for sure. Because if someone built their home and had some paint downstairs in 1977, and then in 1981 wanted to touch up their paint and it still had lead in it, who's gonna know that? Nobody. Obviously he did that today. He talked a lot about, did he talk about lead paint today? Yeah, so.
Today was lead paint,
So there's so many variables with lead paint.
and
It's-
nobody walked out, so I don't want to do it.
No, you do in your head though. You're like, oh. It's tough. So with the lead paint, if someone were saying, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, I'm gonna be very direct and just say, listen, realistically, this home was built prior to 1978. Unless they've gutted it to the studs, it's probably some lead paint. Is it probably safe because it's been painted over? Sure. Am I gonna tell them that? No, I don't wanna be liable for that. Huh?
It's still a private property.
Yeah, I don't want to, so basically, usually that's a conversation that they're okay with, and most people in this area aren't alarmed by lead paint, because again, it's not abnormal here. It's not abnormal here. If we were in like somewhere that like, it's just not abnormal here. For that to be a thing. So this is the contract to purchase. This is what it looks like. It's gonna lay out. Here's gonna where you're gonna put, this is my buyer. I'm offering to be on the record. You can find this on the tax card. Find it sometimes in the MLS. I personally always go to the tax card like I showed you. You'll find something that works for you. You're your own business owner. You do whatever you want. Me personally, I do the tax assessment. You're gonna want to say that I'm an agent, I'm a buyer's agent, Brian Gomez, and by Keller Williams Realty. Here's my purchase price. Here's what I'm putting out for an initial deposit. Here's what you're getting after a home inspection, and we're good to go on our purchase and sales agreement. It's my understanding the purchase and sales agreement is not binding until they get that check. However, I've had one attorney tell me that and another attorney tell me that thing. I've had one attorney tell me, oh no, this offer is not accepted until I have the check to bind it. Could that be challenged? Absolutely. You signed the contract. So, and there's nothing in here stating that it's not binding until the money is received. They could easily say, if you didn't drop the deposit check off, they could say, sorry, you never dropped the deposit check off, so we're putting the house back on the market. That's a whole other thing. So this is your initial deposit. This is your deposit at purchase and sales agreement. In Massachusetts, we have a duration to the offer. So it's hard now because you don't want to, normally, when I first started in real estate and it was a more neutral market, it would be 24 hours, maybe 48 hours. Now, obviously, people put their home on the market, they let it get shown a bunch, and then they have an offer deadline, and then there's a review and then an answer. I usually now, depending on that situation, would do it for like a week, maybe 5 days, maybe 3 days. It depends. It depends on when basically the deadline is. And then the purchase and sales agreement, this is where you're gonna know, this is when the purchase and sales agreement is due. If there's an issue, so say you have a home inspection, an issue popped up, and that means that we're not gonna be able to go to purchase and sales because I actually have a septic guy come out, or I have a plumber come out to take a look at the heat system before I'm comfortable moving forward. You're gonna issue an extension to this contract to purchase, and it's gonna move the section 3 out by a week, say. So this is where this is your timeline until you get to purchase and sales, and it's very important that you pay attention to it. Any date that you put in this contract should also be put in your calendar. And you should have reminders set days ahead of time, because you want to be getting ahead of this. This is not something you want to be dealing with the day of. So closing, this is gonna know this is when we plan to close. We plan to transfer title on this day, and here, it's usually at the attorney's office or at the county registry of deeds.
Should you inform like your buyers how much like they should be paying or they should?
Yeah, so they'll ask you. So when you want to have this discussion up front, so like you say, you see, that's when you come sometimes when you show a property, you'll see them like talking in the driveway for a while, or talking in their car or whatever. They're usually discussing stuff like this, like how much money do you have on hand? You put 3.5% down. If I have an FHA buyer, I'm probably gonna do 1,000 and then the rest of the deposit upfront. It's gonna make them competitive. If it's, you know, someone who is a baller and has a ton of cash and wants to like really put like a solid offer in, I might do 5 and 10 or 10 and 10. But I also like to make them aware that there's a chance that this money could get tied up. So whatever amount you put up here, make sure it's not going to hinder your ability to buy something else if something hits the fan. So, because I have had, again,
But you don't get the financing. Get your 5 and 10, but then there's the money that you're
Yeah.
gonna put up when you put the big money up. Closing, that's the down payment.
yes, so this is basically not in addition to, but a contribution of. So if you're doing 5,000 here, that's 5,000 less of your down payment. Then you do another 10, that's 15,000 total less that you have to bring to the table.
Okay,
So then you bring the remaining balance back.
and you
If
put
you're-
that balance on that contract?
So that will put like would be in the purchase and sales agreement. So the purchase and sales agreement is what's gonna, you'll see the mortgage here, so they'll ask like what they be borrowing. So they'll know like, okay, you put 15,000 down and you're borrowing X amount of dollars, what's the missing number? And that's what you bring to the table, plus your closing costs. Plus, if they owe you 1% or a point based on the buyer agency contract, that's what they're bringing to the table. So that's what's laid out here. When you close escrow, the deposit's gonna be held by, if it's a Remax office, that's on the listing side, Remax is holding it in their escrow account. You see checks getting dropped off here, because it's listings that we're collecting checks for. And then they get held in an interest-bearing account. If there is a situation where it needs to be released, you sign a release, you get that done. I'm not gonna go down that road though, that's a rabbit hole. So here's the mortgage contingency. I wanna bring up the whole thing, so- The mortgage contingency is what's gonna be the amount that you're, I'm gonna pull it up. It's the amount that you are. What's my password for DocuSign? I'm gonna pull one up for you. Offer Heritage. So we got a lot of offers on this property. So this is what an offer is going to look like, an offer package in total. So this is kind of going over what we're doing here. This is, you're not going to send them over your buyer agency contract. They don't need that. But when you submit the offer, you're going to need this disclosure. So she's,
Can you say that again?
You send that to the listing?
hang on, I want to,
Send the offer, contract the purchase, you send that to the listing agent.
you send that to the listing agent. That's
They
your offer.
accept it or not accept it or whatever, go back and forth. Once you agree on that, then you send it to the closing attorney, the right to pay, the buyer's attorney. the right to pay this.
Yeah, so at this point, we're gonna go through it all right now. So this here is the, I'm gonna block some stuff out there because I'd use it for a class. But here is this is what you presented to them. They need to know, like, as part of the offer package, because we're gonna need it for our records, they're gonna need it for their records. That it's been disclosed to them that they're getting represented by a buyer agent and vice versa. The listing agent with the offer. This is the contract of purchase. So here, here's the buyer, here's the seller. The agent is Linda Champion. She's from CUE Realty. She's putting an offer in on 9 Heritage Lane in Methuen, Mass. This is a typo, as described in MLS. This is nice to add, and this is what I always add, but this is what I'll leave Debbie for. You want to put as described in MLS number, including the refrigerator, washer, dryer, because if there's any changes to the MLS after the fact, like if they're like sellers are like, oh, well, you know what, I thought I was gonna include the washer, but now I don't want to. You want to make sure that's noted, because you could say, no, when I submitted this offer in the MLS on this date,
Yeah, that's what I want.
it said that this was gonna be included. So, the purchase price was $519. And so they're gonna do $1,000 to bind the offer, and then put to be delivered. Oh, see, I got New Hampshire and Mass confused there. I said earlier there was nothing in the contract that said that it was binding. In Mass it does. So you do need to have your initial check-in to have this binding. Sometimes I have to switch my hats, I'm sorry. So this, you need $1,000 to bind the offer. Here, it's also stating it's gonna be delivered upon receipt of written acceptance. So as soon as the offer is accepted, it's on you. You gotta be like, hey, I need that check. I need to get either give me a copy and pop it in the mail as soon as possible, or drop it here, I'll drop it off, or drop it off at the broker's office. Give them the address. And then they're gonna agree to give me $24,950 as an additional deposit upon the execution of the purchase and sales agreement. The offer was good until 8 PM on the 12th. And the purchase and sales agreement would have been due at 7 PM on July 23rd. We would have closed at 2 PM on August 31st at the Essex County Registry of Deeds. We would be holding the escrow because I was on the listing side of things. I unfortunately don't have any purchase ones that are like readily available. This is like the closest one I have for Mass. The mortgage contingency here, so this is saying that the buyer's obligation to purchase is conditioned upon obtaining a written commitment for financing in the amount of $493,000, $493.50. Those numbers get weird. About $493,000 at prevailing rates, terms and conditions by August 23rd. This is a big one. This is the number you have to look out for. This is the date. So if they don't have written commitment for their financing by this day, and you're representing the buyer, like say you submitted this offer for your buyer and you're talking to the lender and they're like, you know what, we don't have the appraisal back. I can't give them a clear, commitment with no conditions by the 23rd. You're gonna get ahead of it and you're gonna have to start talking to the listing agent and say, listen, we didn't get the appraisal and we need an extension. If you don't, or if you wait till the last day and you start calling people and then you don't send an extension before 5 PM, the seller has a right to take it and sell their house to somebody else. You would hope they wouldn't, but it happens. This is the second page. So this is the inspection section. So the contingency section has mortgage and inspection. This is basically saying they have until July 18th to have a home inspection.
What do you want to get waived?
Then if it's waived, you want to strike out this whole section. So there'll be an option in DocuSign for you to scan, like highlight this, and then there'll be lines, strike out through this whole thing, or put a big X through it. Because you need to make it clear that you waived it. You could write waived here, but you're technically supposed to strike it out. Representations and acknowledgements. The buyer acknowledges receipt of an agency disclosure, lead paint disclosure, and home inspection facts for consumers brochure. The buyer is not relying upon any representation, verbal or written, from any real estate broker or licensee concerning legal use, any reference to the category, single family, multifamily, residential, commercial, or the use of this property in any advertisement or listing sheet, including the number of units, numbers of rooms, or any other classification, is not representation concerning. Oh, wait, yeah. Basically, it's saying that you've been given all everything you need to be given up to this point to be making a good decision about this. If the buyer defaults in buyer's obligations, all monies tendered as a deposit shall be paid to the seller as liquidated damages, and this shall be the seller's sole remedy. So that's basically saying if you're not hitting your inspection date, so you can't get an inspector out there until the 19th and you don't ask for an extension, they can just take the money. And that's why people usually put smaller deposits up front. Because there's times when buyers will ghost on you. And it's only happened to me one time, but it happens. And then you're sitting there like, oh, well, looks like your $1,000 is gone. And there is also sometimes where your client wants to back out of a transaction because of a home inspection. And when that happens and the seller gives them a hard time, you don't want a ton of money tied up in litigation or in like mediation or whatever that remedy would be.
Looks like the deposit goes through its operating.
And at that point, the first deposit is when the offer gets accepted. The second deposit is after the home inspection and at the time of purchase and sales agreement. At the time of purchase and sales agreement, so as soon as this gets accepted, you're gonna send it over to the attorney's office, and they're gonna use this as like the skeleton to build the purchase and sales agreement. So it's
You sell
basically,
it to the sellers.
no. Wait. Yeah, no, you're gonna send it to the buyer's attorney. Seller's attorney might write it, buyer's attorney might write it. If the seller is choosing not to have an attorney, then the closing attorney is gonna write the purchase and sales agreement. If the seller has representation for their attorney, it really depends on who wants to. It's usually the seller that does it, but the buyer's attorney needs it because they're negotiating with the seller's attorney on behalf of
Okay,
them,
so
on
you
behalf
send
of the
it to
bank.
the seller's attorney.
Send
the
it to
buyer's
all of them.
attorney, And then the buyer's attorney contacts the seller.
Well, because yeah, you're working for the buyer, so I'm working with the closing attorney. So I'm taking my contract and I'm giving it to you. Here it is, here's the executed copy. If there's any addendums that come up, extensions that come up, then I send those over as well. And then the listing agent's doing the same thing with the seller's attorney.
But the flow is buyer agent,
I'm gonna write this.
closing attorney. Okay.
Oh. Oh. Good.
And the lender will give you that. Okay.
So give you what?
The attorney that,
Yes, so. Sorry, I really thought this was a face pepper. But I think it will be an easy visual for you guys. Huh? I'm pulling a whiteboard out if someone's on Zoom. I'm so sorry if you can't see it. So. Excuse my handwriting. So. Here we have the buyer agent and the seller agent. We put together this deal here. Here's our executed contract. We both have copies of this because we've negotiated it.
Right.
So I got my client to sign it, she's gotten her client to sign it, and now we both have copies. Me, on my end, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna give it to the closing attorney and the lender. Huh?
Where you come from?
The closing attorney? So the lender will tell me, or she'll usually ask me, who do you want to use for closing?
Oh,
Because I've been doing it where I have relationships with attorneys, but for you, if you're newer, they'll usually say, oh, thank you so much. Who do you want to use for the closing attorney? Or here, this is who I'm using for the closing attorney. I use Quicksilva or I use Right Door Title or whatever it is. If I'm on the seller side, I'm taking this contract and I'm going to send it to my seller's attorney. Because this attorney and this attorney are going to take this contract to purchase and they're going to create the PNS.
So the seller,
And what usually,
the seller agent sends it to the seller's attorney and the buyer agent sends it to the closing attorney.
so usually it would be the seller's agent who would write the initial draft. And then they say, hey, I wrote this draft. Could you redline it for me? They're gonna take this purchase and sales, they're gonna send it to you. They might copy you on it, but you're gonna see some sort of correspondence between the two of them that's gonna say, okay, here's the purchase and sales, I wrote it, or, you know, I'm not, oh, Mr. Seller, here, I don't wanna use an attorney, I just wanna pay the fee for the closing attorney. Okay, well, then in that case, this guy's not really doing anything. He's just gonna, the buyer's attorney is gonna write the purchase and sales agreement, and it's gonna go with the seller. If the seller's comfortable with it, then great, there's no other attorney to redline it. I would always recommend that there be another attorney involved, but you're a facilitator, you're helping, your support, you don't have the end say. So if we're doing it, we're not gonna get into that scenario, we're just gonna stick with both parties have attorneys. They start redlining. This needs to be redlined and finished by this purchase and sales date. So by, what day was it? So in this specific instance, it needs to be done by 7/23. And if it wasn't, if we were hitting roadblocks because of home inspection or something, it's our buyer agent's job more than the seller agent's job, because my clients have a deposit at risk. And in this market, you probably have, like, you're probably sitting on 5 other offers that you can go back to. So if I'm representing a buyer, this is buyer class, and I see, hey, it's now the 22nd and we don't have a contractor out to look at that issue yet, I'm gonna send an email and I'm gonna say, hey, buyer attorney, seller attorney, we need an extension because I can't get a contractor out there in time. My clients are really trying, but we just can't. So then sometimes it's formal, but sometimes if there's 2 attorneys involved, they just send an email that say, hey, dude, you're okay with extending this to 7:30? And they're like, yup. And then it's just an email. Sometimes it's formal and sometimes it's an addendum.
And where is this process? Does the second check have to be?
So now, okay, say it's now, okay, we've extended, we did the purchase and sales on 7:30, we hit that date, all set. Buyer and seller, now this purchase and sales, it gets this red line, it's so pretty, it's like a little file, it's perfect, everyone's happy with it. They're gonna take this and they're gonna say, hey, Sarah, can you circulate this for signatures? So that means that so they're gonna say, realtor. It's gonna circulate for signature. I'm sorry, this is a mess, but hopefully it makes
That's
sense.
okay. This is great.
So the realtor is gonna circulate it for signatures, and then you're gonna take these, you're gonna say, okay, my buyer, sign this, and then I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna say,
Closing attorney doesn't have to sign, just the buyer.
the closing attorney helped write it. So the closing attorney and the seller's attorney, they helped write it, and then they're saying, hey, and they're negotiating on behalf. So they'll usually reach out to the clients directly and say, hey, this is what this means, this is my suggestion, I think it's fine.
So the only people that actually sign it
Are the buyers.
Are the buyers.
Yeah, sometimes they have us sell it about commission, but it really depends on how they write it. It depends. You'll know if you have to sign it. So the realtor is gonna circulate the signatures. I'm gonna get my client signatures on it, and then I'm gonna say, hey, seller agent, can you please send this? And then once I have the executed copy, I'll drop off the check.
Executed copy because the
But-
buyer signs it and then the seller signs it.
Yes.
And then you send the check out. How long? How long do you have to get the check out? Immediately or-
I would do it in much money. I would not let it go more than 48 hours. So I would, so you're gonna have to fully execute a copy. Some people, for whatever reason, won't won't give you the fully executed copy until they have the deposit. And if that's the case, then there's, like, some people argue over it. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Here you go. You're giving me confirmation that you signed it. I want an email in writing that your client signed it, and then sure, I'll write the check out.
But that check goes into escrow, so it's not like a cash.
Yeah, it's going into an escrow account. So then once I have this fully executed copy, I know that I have to go back as a buyer agent to my buyer. So I'm talking to my buyer over here and say, hey, I need that check. We're gonna put that back.
That's excellent.
So I hope that cleared some stuff up.
Put that in the packet.
It's it looks horrible, but
That lays it right out.
it just is like but it also is situational. You might have an attorney that is like, so like, for instance, if this person, if the seller isn't using, where did I put this? Isn't using an attorney. It makes it a little weird because they have to, like, there's only one attorney. So I would never recommend it. It's not super common, but they're usually trying to save some money. It's worth every penny when you pay for an attorney, in my opinion. In this certain situation, if you X out the seller attorney, then the closing attorney is writing it. And then after the closing attorney writes it, they're gonna review it with the seller. And then if the seller's cool with it, then, you do your due diligence and there's no listing involved. Seller's attorney involved. That's usually when it becomes a little bit more of a hassle for you because your side is doing everything.
Seller, pays for an attorney?
The seller
On the
should-
seller's side?
They should. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just say, I'm just gonna use a closing attorney because it's like a fee. They maybe charge like $200 to write the deed and then they'll charge, but they will make it clear. So I've had situations like that where and then the attorney's office said it was the deal that I was talking about earlier with negotiations that almost fell apart. She used a closing attorney. and the closing attorney issues suing people, so we already have a huge legal bill. So she said, oh, I'm just gonna use closing attorney, that's totally fine. And then things started to expand. So imagine if I did not deal with that, she'd be having to literally come in after that. So when this happens, they usually discuss it, but they make it very clear that they're working for the bank. So they're gonna lay it out, they're gonna explain it to you, but they're not looking out for your best interest, they represent the bank and the buyer. So when you're working with a seller, you just wanna make sure that they are using an attorney if they're willing to. But this is just kind of a little bit about how that comes together. And this is why the contract of purchase is the meat of the purchase and sales, because you're not gonna go and call, seller's not gonna call the seller's attorney, erase that, and the buyer's not gonna close it and verbally tell them what you've negotiated. You're gonna go through and you're gonna go have a contract of purchase, and then they can take all of the information from that contract of purchase, build the purchase and sales. The important thing to note is that once this is pre-packaged, we've got the deposit, we have a fully executed copy, this is no longer a thing. So anything that was written in here that didn't make it into here, is void.
So buyer's agent pretty much writes the offer of purchase.
They do. And then they will negotiate terms. So you're
Oh, yeah.
negotiating on this level, you're negotiating on terms for this contract of purchase, and then we
And
become
then you
act-
submit it.
And then
in
it's
the
just like, it's
negotiations.
more in depth. The purchase and sales has a lot more information. It has information about the deed, it
The
has,
attorney takes care of it.
the attorney takes care of it. So the attorney is taking this contract of purchase, they're turning it into this, and they're negotiating it with the two attorney level. So you're now, I've done my job, I negotiated it, I got you a contract of purchase, it's all set, I'm giving it to you. And it's the attorney's job on both sides. Obviously facilitate if they need help, not killing of it, but you want to basically, it's on them to create this pretty little package that everyone's happy with. And then you circulate it for signatures, and then once that's signed, it's important to note, and the attorneys are usually doing a very good job of making it clear that this is null and void. So if there's a difference, so like sometimes what will happen and where they'll ask you to pop in is if in this contract of purchase, there's no mention of including the washer and dryer. And then the buyer's attorney sends over the purchase and sales and they add washer and dryer. The seller's attorney is gonna call you as a seller's agent in that situation and say, hey, contract of purchase doesn't say anything about appliances and it's in here now. Are we cool with that or no? And it's your job to find out and let them know. And those are like little things that pop up that you would be involved in. It's more on clarification level, and then they carry that purchase and sales, and that becomes the document. Contract to purchase at that point is gone. What was this? Was this the, and this is a horrible lender, but this is the lender. This is like in the offer package, when you're submitting it, it should be all of this. Yeah, that's their pre-approval letter. So that's what that looks like.
What was that? The one about
This honestly, let me see. People can see me and I'm looking at the camera like this. I think it's really just a big giant time is of the essence. I've honestly never seen this. And honestly, this offer was not good. So
But that's not part of like an offer. Whatever that is.
this normally, no, this is not something that I would submit with an offer. This is like something that's as an option, but it's like, this is where you want to talk to Debbie. This is where I'm saying, Debbie. This is not something I do. Debbie would be the person if you have any specific questions
Is that
about
not
that.
a trick?
I don't know, to be
It's a
honest.
Loan disclosure, I'm thinking.
It's about the CD, but I just feel like it's a little redundant. And in Massachusetts, like this is, by the time we're at the CD, this contract is null because we have a purchase and sales
When
agreement.
you put the offer in, when did you tell the seller, demonstrate that you needed that proof of funds or that you're?
That's the financing deadline. So that's here, and that's a very
But that
important
comes
date to
after
pay
the
attention
act.
to. That comes after purchase and sales agreement, but it's agreed upon up front. Oh, that's. So it's agreed upon up front, and it's an important day. So like if you were to see this on the seller side of things, and I know this is a buyer class, so I don't want to get too in depth into it, but if you saw this on the seller side of things, and we were supposed to close, when was this closing? This is like, for me, I wanted 2 weeks though.
Yeah, but I mean,
This
if
is a
I,
week.
if I'm a buyer and I put in a really great offer,
Mhm.
and, you know, I've got no money, but I'm bluffing. So I put in a great offer.
Mhm.
And the offer gets accepted because it's so great. Then we go through that process where a P&S is generated. At what point do they find out, I got no money?
By this day, your financing needs to fall apart, and if you don't give me,
When
based
do I
on
have
this
to
date,
present? So I just have to present.
by the 23rd.
Okay,
In this specific instance, I need that by the 23rd.
okay.
What will happen sometimes is these dates are set, and then the attorneys, maybe there was a lag because of an inspection issue or something. The attorneys are like, no way, this is not gonna be an attainable date.